There was drama on Steelers Twitter involving the weight of Najee Harris, and at the center of it was our guy Wes Euler, who can clear the air about what's happening and about what Najee Harris does actually look like going into the Steelers training camp in a few months here. We'll talk about that, more about Stephon Tuitt and the further impact of his retirement, as well as Mason Rudolph, more shade at Ben Roethlisberger even while he's gone. All that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, and YouTube. If you're watching this video on YouTube, hit the like button on the video if you enjoyed. Hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes Monday through Friday, as well as our bonus episodes and our breaking news updates. If you want to help out the Locked On Steelers podcast, go on Apple Podcasts, leave us a 5-star review with a positive comment. Doing both at the same time gets you a shout out at the end of the show. We thank you for making the Locked On Steelers podcast your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Blue Nile. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings. So use code Locked On at checkout. We'll talk more about that later. But welcome to the show, my man Wes Euler in the Friday slot here. Wes, how you doing? You're in your new place, buddy.
Yeah, I'm doing well. As if you're watching on YouTube, the loyal viewers and listeners here will notice a little bit different. I'm holding the microphone in my hand instead of having it mounted all fancy like I normally do. We're in the process of moving here, CC, all right? So the backgrounds, the settings, all those things, they might change here over the next few weeks. But yeah, brilliant by me. Let's pick right in the middle of OTAs to move when I've got a 7-month-old daughter as well, too. Really smart on my part.
OTAs is a lot better than the season. So yeah, if you had to pick a time, I guess right. Because here's the thing: you can use your time off between mini camp and training camp to settle into the house and get that 7-month-year-old who will be a 10-month-year-old by the time the season starts or the training camp starts. Like that's crazy to think about, right? So maybe you did make the right call.
Hey, I appreciate that.
But let's get into something that you were right in the middle of. Now, this happened a few days ago. I didn't talk much about it because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. Plus, we were dealing with Stephon Tuitt and other things going on at OTAs. But there was an incident where Najee Harris was heard coming on your show, Steeler Nation Radio, or coming over to you guys and telling you guys that he weighs 244 pounds now because he made you guys play a guessing game of some
like
sort.
We were Kennywood.
Exactly. So to figure it out, and then. Afterwards, Mark Kaboly, writer on the Steelers for The Athletic, we know him, we love him. He's been on this show. He tweets that out. He tweets that he heard it, and then I think it's Don Cliveman takes that information and just puts out a tweet that just says, "Oh wow, Najee Harris was listed at 232 pounds as a rookie." So that's and he's now says he's 244 pounds, and then. Rumors go all across the internet. Oh my gosh, he's turned into a fatso. He's put on all this weight. He's just eating uncontrollably.
Eddie
this
Lacy 2.0.
Exactly. And then people like Warren Sharp were attacking Najee Harris. But Najee Harris comes out and tweets, I was 240 pounds, 40-ish pounds last year. Like, y'all don't even know this. And so this kind of escalates. Najee Harris says some reporters are cornballs, and it gets into a whole thing. But Wes, you wanted to clear the air that this wasn't a malfeasance on the part of Mark Kaboly or you guys. This was just kind of, to me, I thought the problem happened with the analysts who were trying to make Najee Harris look bad for his weight without ever seeing him and how he looks at OTAs.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You nailed it. It was all in the context of what happened is, you've seen it, where Arthur Moats and I broadcast, where we do our show during OTAs. We're fortunate. We're right on the sideline there. And I mean, you've sat down with us. We're 10 feet away from where the running backs do their positional drills. They're right in front of our setup. And so with that, we get a really up-close look at Najee Harris, at Benny Snell, and Anthony McFarland pretty much every day at OTAs. Mozi and I were discussing Najee Harris's body transformation. You know, those weird things that dudes do in the context of sports, like, look at his thighs. Oh, look at that ass. I mean, he's been putting in work this offseason, right? That type of conversation in a complimentary type of tone. Najee hears us. We go to break. He comes over. And, you know, again, like we're at Kennywood, and it's like the guess your weight, you know, and if we're within 3 pounds, you win a prize or whatever. Najee looks at us, comes over to the table, looks at Moats, goes, hey, how much you guys think I weigh? Moats says 234. Najee goes, no, not quite, a little bit more than that. Kind of looks at me, and I go, 244. And he was like, hey, how'd you know? Are you cheating? You know, and it was lighthearted. It was jovial. Najee laughed. We laughed. He goes back to doing his drills. That was it. That's the only thing that happened. I tweeted it out. Kabali tweeted it out. And now, obviously, Mark Kabali has a little bit more of a substantial following and more clout amongst Steeler Nation than I do. So his tweet was the one that was picked up because Kabali was sitting right next to Moats and I on the bench when all this happened. So he was sitting right there and saw it all go down. Some people from the national media picked this up, and they just run with, oh, my goodness, Najee Harris weighs 240. That's 12 pounds more than he weighed last year, and it just got all blown out of proportion. And is he in shape? Is he fat? Is he Eddie Lacy 2.0? It was nothing like that. It was us being complimentary of him. Again, that body transformation that we just often talk about football players having from their rookie year to their sophomore season. When things finally slow down for them, they've got an off season. They know how they want to attack, you know, training and nutrition and all these different things. They're not going through pro days and the combine and all this stuff. They are just focused on their body and getting ready for the next NFL season. That's all it was. I promise you, of those 244 pounds, I mean, this dude is maybe 1% body fat. He looks like a G.I. Joe action figure.
He does.
He's given off
jacked.
Derrick Henry vibes, I think is the best way that I can put it.
Mm-hmm.
And from what we've seen so far too, Chris, he doesn't look like he's lost a step either. So it was all, you know, in conversations of complimentary, like, oh my goodness, look at Najee Harris. He's going to run some people. Arthur Moats even said, I am so glad I'm retired now and I don't have to tackle that guy. My shoulders are just hurting thinking about tackling that guy. That's all it was. And it got picked up, it got blown up, it got ran with a million different ways. But that's all that happened. And no one was angry. No one was accusing Najee of being out of shape or gaining weight in a bad way or anything like that.
And no one in our camp of people who cover the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Correct.
It was the outs, and it's funny how this manifests, and this keeps happening when things happen. They get taken out of context, and they're not the people here; they're the people outside, you know, that haven't seen Najee Harris. I've stood with Mark Kaboli, and we've both been like, my goodness. Those
it's ridiculous.
Quads.
It's insane.
Like we've just been amazed. And it's not just how he looks, it's how he's moving, because he's carrying those 244 pounds and his feet are lightning quick through drills. He's bouncing all over the place. He's exploding when he starts to his get off on plays. This is a guy who when he's going to make plays, when he's going to hit the hole, I fear for the people that have to tackle him one-on-one. If you got a gang tackle, sure, you'll stand a good chance. But even if you bring him down, he's going to make you feel it.
Yes.
He's that explosive. He's that talented. And we saw how tough he was last year, getting 1,200 yards despite all of the Steelers' offensive line problems and despite the Steelers having no deep threat really in the passing game that allowed defenses to just play up to the line of scrimmage. So to me, I think this is once again people have been doing this for a while. There were a lot of people nationally that said the Steelers had the worst draft pick, of the first round in 2021, and they shouldn't have gotten Najee Harris, and you don't draft running backs in the first round, and all these other things, and however your philosophy feels about this. But
and now they're trying to justify that narrative as well too that they created.
That's what I think this is. They're trying to justify their narrative. They're trying to say, "Hey, see, I was right," even though he had the most rushing yards of a Steelers rookie in franchise history. Right. Even though without him, they're probably a 5 or 6, 5 or 4 win team last year and missed the playoffs. Even though he was a dynamic player who made the Pro Bowl as a rookie, all those things come into a factor here. To me, Wes, it's once again, I think people trying way too hard to prove these analytics that don't involve actually studying football and just looking at stats.
That, and I think also too, right, Chris? It's the end of May. It's early June. People are just looking for storylines. They're just looking for something to talk about. We've created this monster with the NFL, right, where it's a year-round sport. You're doing a Locked On Steelers podcast here 52 weeks a year. Motzi and I are doing our show on Steelers Nation Radio all throughout the season. There's the NFL Network. There's all these different – football is a 12-month sport now. It really is. So I think part of that, too, is like people are just always fishing for storylines, something that they can run with. But that is – there was nobody within Steelers circles who's there at OTAs that has any concern about the shape or condition that Najee Harris is in. It's the opposite, as you have alluded to. It's, my goodness, this guy looks like he is ready to take off. If the offensive line is better, if the pass game is a little bit better, watch out because he could be primed for a monster season.
I certainly think he could be, and regardless of how whatever people talk about his weight and how he might look, you got to go see him in practice. You ain't seen him in practice. Don't talk to me about his weight. Don't act like you know. Go to
Latrobe at the end of July and get an up close look at Najee Harris, and you won't be worried.
Exactly. You can use your access that you have with your national following and go get him, and stop wasting everyone's time with these bad takes. But we got to move on and talk more about Stephon Tuitt and some lasting impact of that, and then we'll get to Mason Rudolph's comments about Ben and passing on the quarterback position. But first, we got to talk to you guys about BlueNile.com. Whether you're ready to pop the question or you're celebrating a milestone moment, find jewelry as unique as her with the modern convenience of online shopping at BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has simple online tools that let you choose the diamond shape, size, and clarity, as well as the setting style. Blue Nile's bench jewelers will then handcraft her perfect engagement ring. Each ring is one of a kind. Looking for fine jewelry, but having trouble choosing? Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, and they're available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. Make your moment sparkle with jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners will get $50 off purchases of $500 or more. This podcast exclusive includes engagement rings, so use the code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKEDON, all one word, Locked On, and you'll also get their order being every order being insured, shipping free, and they'll arrive in discreet packaging that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece when you visit BlueNile.com today. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter. He's Wes Euler. We're talking all things here on the Pittsburgh Steelers as OTAs come to an end. Minicamp starts Monday, so that'll be exciting. Before we get into the Stephon Tuitt thing, I just want to point out a quick news note point. Tuzar Skipper is back with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He has signed a contract. He was actually at OTAs on Thursday, so that was actually cool for them. And if you're a super Steeler junkie, you know who Tuzar Skipper is, a preseason hero from a couple years back. So you're probably excited to see that he's coming back. And there's obviously is he gonna do it, James Harrison? So there's gonna be that storyline in training camp too. But let's get on to the Stephon Tuitt talking points here. Wes, Chris Wormley spoke, and he spoke as if he spoke on Thursday, and he spoke as if he's like, this is his job now to take the role of Stephon Tuitt. But the question I have for you is the job of replacing Stephon Tuitt by, is that by someone who's already on the roster, or is this someone that the Steelers are going to have to go out and find somewhere?
If it's already on the roster, I do think it's going to have to be a kind of by a committee approach, if that makes sense, right? I do think Chris Wormley would be the first in that pecking order, but you'd be relying on Loudermilk, on Leal, on Adams. There is a stable of guys there who you can believe can get the job done. I think we like those guys more as, your proverbial 6th and 7th man coming off the bench, to use a basketball analogy, as opposed to one of your starters. But there's still certainly some pedigree there, and the unknown, the 3rd-round draft pick of the rookie in DeMarvin Leal, and what he could become as well. I still wouldn't hate bringing someone else in, because again, if Wormley and Loudermilk and Leal, if that's your depth, and Adams as well too, who showed some flashes last year, I'm feeling really confident about that group in terms of, again, like a bench mob type thing. But I just don't know, Chris, unless you want to go out and hit the trade market. A lot of people are talking about Ndamukong Suh. He's 35 years old.
35.
Does that really fit?
Like that.
Does that really fit the mold of where this team is trying to go? They've gotten way younger on the offensive side of the football. I think they're trying to do that a little bit on the defensive side of the football as well too. Ogunjobi is a name that's been mentioned, but he's coming off that Liz Frank injury, and so do you really want to put all your faith in the fact that you're going to get Tyson Alualu and Ogunjobi both back and healthy and
Right.
return
That's
to
a lot.
form. That's a lot of question marks. And now I know Ogunjobi is much younger than Alualu. He's still in his 20s. So there is that. That's important to note as well, too. But I just don't know if you want 2 of your 3 defensive linemen coming off of significant injuries as well, too. So it's easy to do a lot of these things in hindsight of, well, they should have used one of their first 2 picks on a defensive lineman. Now, they should have hit the market. Well, if they knew this was coming, they should have signed Akeem Hicks, right? That was a tweet that we got on the show today. I think for the Steelers that they still can have success doing this by committee. Because, again, there are guys that showed flashes last year, and I think you can expect them to be improved even more so this year. But when you're looking at some of the names that are out there available in free agency, I would like, again, on the surface, I like the idea of going shopping and bringing in another body into that conversation. I just don't know who fits the billing for the Steelers realistically in that regard right now. There's going to be surprise cuts and things like that at training camp that could happen. But as we sit here right now,
I do agree with that. I think that's an interesting assessment there. There was one person who was brought up by some listeners to me. Now, I don't know if this is realistic because this guy was a first-round pick and a 13th overall pick just a few years ago in 2018. But someone brought up the idea of like a Da'Ron Payne type of player, a guy who is at the end of his rookie deal. He's on his 5th-year extension. He cost his team like $8.5 million. What if the Steelers traded to get someone like that? And it was like, hey, here's an interior defensive lineman who is young, you can plug in. Maybe he can make some moves. You could probably trade draft picks. Maybe that's what you trade. Maybe that's if you're on the train to trade Mason Rudolph at the end of training camp or at sometime during training camp, if you're comfortable with Trubisky and Pickett, maybe you involve him somehow in this package. But the point being to me is that this is where Omar Khan could show his first craftsmanship as far as a move, maybe not in free agency, maybe in free agency if someone cuts. I mean, James Bradbury was cut by the Giants, well after the rounds of free agency ended. That's how the Steelers got Joe Hayden in the middle of training camp, back in 2017. So that's not out of the realm of possibility, but trading to get somebody might be on the table too. And I also pointed this out. They could use the money because they now have $21 million in cap space. They could use that money to trade for another position somewhere else, a cornerback, a center, someone that they think, hey, we never thought we had a chance at this guy, but we can afford this guy. And let's do that. Let's add a strength to another part of our team since we lost the strength here in Tuitt. So I think that's a possibility. But Wes, before we go on to the Mason Rudolph thing, I wrote this piece for SteelersNow.com on Thursday. So go check this out. I called it the Lost Stars, the Steelers 2014 draft class that should have burned bright. Basically detailing this is now the end with Stephon Tuitt retiring. This is now the final chapter of that 2014 draft class. For the Steelers, you had Ryan Shazier in the first round, Stephon Tuitt in the second round, and Martavis Bryant in the fourth round. 3 dudes who were playing like superstars at times for the Steelers. Ryan Shazier in 2017, before he got injured, he played in 12 games, including the game that he got injured in. It was his last game ever. He had 11 passes defensed and 3 interceptions. No other linebacker finished the season with those numbers. In pass coverage. With guys.
And he played 11 and a half games.
He played 11 and a half games, and that includes Luke Kuechly, Bobby Wagner, forgetting another big one, like Deion Jones, just any linebacker at the time, nobody had those numbers. And he was 25 years old in his fifth year of 14, 15, 16, his 4th year of playing in the NFL. Yeah. So you're talking about a guy who was on the rise, and you lose him so abruptly in the middle of a season when you were 9-2. You would eventually get 10-2 after you beat the Bengals, and you finish up 13-3, and you lose him. Martavis Bryant, who was a phenomenal athlete, a superstar talent at wide receiver at times when he was on the field. I mean, he had 8 touchdowns in 10 games as a rookie. He had 6 touchdowns the year after that. He was suspended for a season, but they came back and was still a contributor in 2017 before he was shipped off to the Raiders. And his career was it. And now you look at Tuitt. If all 3 of these guys have just normal careers, if they just don't have their careers abrupted or interrupted by something that's outside of the Steelers front office control, where would we
Oh.
be talking about the late 2010s generation of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
I honestly think a lot of things, and this is always fun, right? Like this is one of the things that people like us love to do, these what if hypothetical scenarios. I think that would be viewed as one of the best draft classes in modern Steelers history. Everyone talks about the classes in the 70s and the year, Steelers had 4 or 5 Hall of Famers in one draft class and all those things. Okay, it wouldn't be to that level. But in the modern era, in the 7-round draft era, I mean, are you kidding me? Ryan Shazier, as you mentioned, who was arguably the best off-ball linebacker in football, and that's not being a homer.
It's not hyperbole.
That's not hyperbole. He was in that same stratosphere as Luke Kuechly and Bobby Wagner, like you mentioned, and he was only 25 years old. It's safe to say he could have even gotten a little bit better. Stephon Tuitt, Martavis Bryant. I mean, those 3 guys all had their moments where they were dominant forces, where they were just unblockable, unguardable, whatever different adjective you want to use. And I also think, Chris, another what if with this too is if those 3 guys stay healthy, if those 3 guys are still Pittsburgh Steelers at this point, or at least, maybe Martavis ends up playing 7 or 8 years in Pittsburgh and then signs somewhere else, something like that. But I don't think we'd be looking back at the last decade and saying they only have 3 playoff wins either. I think they would have more than that because just there's so many crucial losses there, and the draft positions as well too, right? You don't have to go up and get Devin Bush. Maybe you take somebody other than Chase Claypool that year in the 2nd round as well too if you still have Martavis Bryant. Like that is when I saw your article today when you brought this topic up, that is I think going to be an underrated Steelers what if. Like we'll always talk about what if with Ryan Shazier.
Right.
But as you put it, to be fair and not disrespectful to Shazier or anything, it really now is a bigger picture of these guys, all for different reasons. NFL careers didn't go as long as we thought. None of them played into their 30s. And man, all 3 of those guys supremely talented, and again had their moments where you could argue they were the best guy on the field at times.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I'm just like I look at how these guys played, and for Tuitt, I know his is a bit different because he played in the years without Shazier, but now you're in a position where he was 29 this year, playing in the NFL. His last year where he played for the Steelers, he was 27 years old. That's a year younger than when Cam Hayward made his first Pro Bowl and had his first double-digit sack season, and that's when Tuitt got 11 sacks. And this was, I wrote about this, I talked about this when Stephon Tuitt was putting up those numbers. I'm like, this is the Cam Hayward trajectory. Hayward was very good, a loved Steeler for years, but was never in that top tier of interior defensive lineman until he got to that late part of his 20s. And now we talk of him as in like he's the guy right next to, like if there's a guy that's next to or to Aaron Donald, he's right in that conversation with Chris Jones and those guys. That's where Stephon Tuitt was headed. And so, yes, losing him is a big loss. And again, I look at, put all these guys together. Say Martavis Bryant. I know Martavis Bryant is different because his situation was more of his own decisions and off the field, substance abuse, marijuana, and however you feel about marijuana should be legal in the NFL. These were still things that he kind of put on himself. Whereas Tuitt, his brother died, that changed everything. Ryan Shazier paralyzed in a terrible football accident. Like I get those are different, but still, I'm talking about from a front office perspective. They nailed these guys talent-wise. They got, maybe the best linebacker, a star defensive lineman, and a receiver with Randy Moss-like potential.
Maybe the best linebacker, defensive lineman, and wide receiver in the class.
Yeah, I mean, you put yourself in that conversation. And like you said, also, if Ryan Shazier doesn't get hurt, that year, they don't just win more playoff games. They beat the Patriots in the Jesse James catch game because he's playing. He helps them take away Rob Gronkowski, and then because they only lost that game by a field goal. So like he's worth more than 3 points in that game. That means they win the 1 seed. The Jaguars don't come to Pittsburgh in the divisional round. It's like the Bills or someone else, and then they get to play that team. If they win that game, they host the Patriots again, most likely in the AFC Championship game in their house with Shazier, with Tuitt, and with Martavis Bryant. And who knows? They might pull up again. And maybe we're talking completely different about that era. And then that doesn't even include 2018 when they missed the playoffs. 2019, imagine 2019 when they were when they traded to get Devin Bush. they would have had Ryan Shazier being the captain of that defense.
In his absolute prime.
In his absolute prime, being the captain of that defense.
That was the best defense in the league, and imagine if you added Ryan Shazier at his peak.
It would be insane. It would be so insane. And to me, and not to mention also, you talked about trading up to get Devin Bush at 10th overall. The Steelers traded what, a first, a second, and a third to make that move, right? You look at those picks. What if they don't trade up? What if they use those picks to just get guys that were just available to them? They could have gotten Noah Fant, Darnell Savage, in the later part of the round. They could have gotten Deebo Samuel if they really wanted to, guys like that. Or you still trade up to the 10th round, but you're not looking for a Devin Bush. You get a Jonah Williams to be on your interior offensive line, a Chris Lindstrom, a Rashawn Gary as another edge rusher, a Brian Burns, and a Garrett Bradbury, Jeffrey Simmons, a guy like that. There's so many things that the unfortunate happenstances of the 2014 draft class, to me, that changed the entire trajectory of the Steelers in the 2010s, that doesn't get talked about enough. Whenever someone talks about, they only won 3 playoff games, y'all don't understand all these things. And I know every front office, they have their troubles. There's always unfortunate things that happen. But we're talking about a draft class with 3-star players.
Yeah.
And this happened, and the Steelers not getting to reap the full benefits of any of them.
I loved the topic by you. It's great because the ripple effects there are just one last one for you. I love Pat Freiermuth. You love Pat Freiermuth.
Yes.
We all love Pat Freiermuth, and we are stoked on how good we think this guy can be. But imagine in 2019 you take Noah Fant, right? And then last year in the second round you take Creed Humphrey.
Oof. You're hitting us too hard, man.
Like there's just, so, and again, there's a lot of teams across the National Football League that can play similar what if type things. But as you mentioned, the devastating injury to Ryan Shazier, the circumstances with Stephon Tuitt, the circumstances with Martavis Bryant. I mean, that's a draft class that could have changed I guess they did change the trajectory of the Steelers in terms of their careers being cut short. But man, there's a lot to sink your teeth into if you're getting into one of those, sitting around the bar with your buddies playing the what if game. That's one with a lot of meat on the bone, Mr. Carter.
That certainly is. There's a lot of what if games we could play, and we'll play this more as the off season goes on. We don't have much to talk about, but I felt like it was important to talk about that as well as the impact of now not having Stephon Tuitt. So we'll talk about that more as we go on. But I want to get to Mason Rudolph's comments because he was talking about his mentorship of Kenny Pickett and working with Mitch Trubisky, and he found a way to throw in another dig at Ben. We'll talk about that in just a minute here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, we got to talk to you guys about BetOnline.net. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting stats and sports information. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's NBA Finals, which kicked off Thursday night, as well as the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are coming to a wrap in the next few weeks. So keep up with all that action as well as Major League Baseball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action when you visit BetOnline, where the game starts. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Wesley Euler, breaking things down on your Pittsburgh Steelers. Wes, we got to get into some commentary that Mason Rudolph has, and I've been teasing this the entire show because this is important. Now, Mason Rudolph has done a little bit of talking with the Pittsburgh media, and he's discussed kind of how he's working with his QB competition. Now, and this is something that I've said. For the people who think that just because Mason Rudolph has seen Mitch Trubisky being the first Steelers free agent signed and then Kenny Pickett being the team's first-round draft pick, people feel like, he should be moping around. He's not wanted there. They're doing him dirty. Mason Rudolph doesn't seem to feel that way. He seems to feel like, hey, it's competition. I gotta beat these guys out. But he's also working with them. He talked about how he's working with them with this quote from Brian Batko put in his work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian also been on the show, great writer. Check him out with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And here's what Mason Rudolph said, quote, "We've probably all been in situations, whether it's high school, college, or pro, where we're the incumbent starter and there's a new freshman, a new rookie, a highly recruited guy. I've always believed in the starter shouldn't have to go out of his way because he's got a lot of things to deal with, but definitely be open to questions and help the growth and development of a younger quarterback. Yeah. And he also said that Kenny Pickett has a great attitude. Now, this gets a little bit more as well because as Brian Betko put in this story, he said Mason Rudolph knew where the questions were going. As a veteran, he finds himself trying to take on the responsibility of helping Kenny Pickett as opposed to being, and he puts, quote, being like someone else, as Mason Rudolph said, alluding to Ben Roethlisberger, who said just weeks after, or a week after Mason Rudolph was drafted, one Ben Roethlisberger made it public he felt like the Steelers shouldn't have drafted him and that they should have used that pick on a skill position player. But then he also said on a radio show that if the new guy asked him anything, he would just point to the playbook. And there's always been that tension between Ben and Mason that things haven't added up, including on Ben's final home game at the Pittsburgh Steelers when the Steelers got the interception to clinch the game, and Ben wanted to go out to take the knee. Mason Rudolph trying to run on the field. So there's been a bit of back and forth here. But to me, this may be a shot, but maybe it's a shot that Mason Rudolph's like, hey, I'm not going to continue the cycle that was passing to me. I do want to help these guys because we do all see each other as teammates, and we do all want to be our best versions of ourselves. Heck, Kenny Pickett said it's not a competition. We're competing with ourselves, but at the same time, we're all working together to be the best that we can for this team. What's your reaction when you see these comments? Is Mason Rudolph taking this too far, or is this just kind of a what it is situation?
So two things here, right? The first is Mason Rudolph isn't lying.
And that's the other thing. He's not making this up.
He's not making this up. And listen, I'm not saying this to poo-poo on Ben Roethlisberger or step on any toes. You can go back. The audio's there. The interviews are there. Ben was never warm and fuzzy towards Mason.
Never.
He was quite the opposite. That's not an opinion. That's just fact. That's the first thing. But the second thing is, Mason, maybe pick another target, right?
Right.
You're not that guy, pal. You're not
that guy.
This is not Aaron Rodgers complaining that Brett Favre didn't give him any help, right?
That's very true.
This is not Patrick Mahomes complaining that Alex Smith was just telling him to point to the playbook. So while Mason is right, maybe it's, sometimes certain things are better left unsaid. Sometimes it just seems like sour grapes depending on where it's coming from. And so while I do think Mason is justified in some of these things that he said, buddy, it might just be time to move on and stop all this. Because, hey, you and I know it both, Chris. There are a lot of people in this town and across Steeler Nation who want to see Mason Rudolph exit stage right, who want to see him, traded or released or whatever. And I don't think this stuff is helping his standing amongst the fan base, a fan base that for the most part loves and adores Ben Roethlisberger.
And that's the thing is that, part of it, Mason doesn't have to think too far back. In that same game where I was talking about where he tried to take a knee from the entire game on, thank you, Ben. It was just chanting the entire game. I'd never seen a going away party.
Yeah.
I'd never seen a going away party that awesome for a player like Ben Roethlisberger. And again, in a game that they were fighting for their playoff lives in. Like, they needed to win that game to stay alive in the playoff hunt.
The only thing that I can think in our lifetime that compares to that is Derek Jeter hitting the walk-off single to win. But the Yankee season was over. They didn't go on to the postseason like the Steelers did. You're right. That was such a unique situation.
It was a unique situation. Him getting to sit down on his bench of his home field, walk around the field, thank all the fans who stuck around, then go into the tunnel with his family, all that stuff. So I do agree with you. Mason maybe doesn't need to pick these battles. Now, granted, the battle he's picking with is someone that's not in the locker room anymore, and it doesn't seem to matter. But
doesn't that make it seem a little bit more like sour grapes too?
Exactly. That's where I'm going with this. Is that I feel you, Mason. You may be right in that Ben didn't do you right. He should have been a better mentor. All that stuff. But you are past that now. You are still on an NFL roster. You are competing with a guy who was two first round draft pick quarterbacks. One that was brought in as a veteran, one that's being brought in as a rookie. And I commend Mason Rudolph for his approach and working with Kenny Pickett and working with Mitch Trubisky, the guys who are there to take his job. Because let's face it, he was the only quarterback still on the roster from last year. Rest in peace to Dwayne Haskins. That's a tragic situation. But he's the only guy that was left over, and he's the only guy with starting experience on the team. He knows the playbook. He knows Matt Canada. He's worked in this system already. He could absolutely feel like, no, this is mine. I'm taking my ball and going home. You guys figure this out for yourself. But the fact that he's not, he's a great teammate. But all that being said, you don't need to let that get out to the media, because then we start asking these types of questions. And again, I'm not saying this to allege or call Mason Rudolph anything or saying that he's doing anything wrong and how his approach is.
He's not lying.
Because that's the thing. He's not making stuff up. This isn't like he's doing this. I just think that it's you make yourself a target and put targets on your team when these type of things get said. Yes. And granted, I feel like we're contributing to this because we're here talking about the Locked On Steelers podcast.
No. Oh, no.
But at the same time, I'm not doing this in the way that says, oh, man, bad Mason Rudolph. I'm just saying, like, be careful, because we see Najee Harris's weight got put out there in a way that wasn't, anything crazy, and it was tried to be turned against him. This could be a similar situation for Mason.
It's the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. Everything you say, everything you do will be dissected, will be broadcasted, will be picked apart, will be discussed ad nauseum. And so you're right. I think just talk about how you're mentoring the young guys. Put your head down and grind away. Just, maybe don't poke the Ben Roethlisberger bear, the 18-year, two-time Super Bowl champion, future Hall of Fame bear. Just pick another target.
I certainly feel that's just what he needs to be careful with doing that, and especially with the coming training camp battle. But again, Ben ain't there. I think the main thing here though is he should be commended for taking this approach, because he could have carried on this toxic approach and said, you know what, I'm not doing it. It wasn't done for me. No one made him change, so I'm not changing. But like you said, Mason isn't that guy. He's not the guy that I think that everyone looks at to say, you are definitely the heir to Ben Roethlisberger. Some people think he could be. Some people, there's still people on Twitter that say Mason deserves the chance. And hey, I'm saying he's getting the chance. I even did a show where I talked about he is not completely out of a chance to start this year. He's still my third favorite. He's third on my list of guys who would, but I don't eliminate him from the quarterback battle, because he does have the experience, he does have the arm, and he can make plays. I even talked to Gunnar Olszewski about a touchdown that Mason Rudolph threw in a 2-minute drill of OTAs. He even confirmed to me about that he threw 2 touchdowns in an OTA drill because Mike Tomlin made him come back on one because he said he was scrambling too much. And Mason Rudolph scrambling too much. That's a little much there. So all that to say, Wes, I think I think Mason Rudolph is having a solid start to OTAs. He could be looking at this in a moping way. He could make this all about himself, and he hasn't, and that says something about his character.
I think you're right. He wants to be that veteran presence in the quarterback room. That much is clear. So just be that guy, right? Just be that guy. And you know what, Chris? If you can be that guy, ask someone like Mark Sanchez. Mark Sanchez was able to hang around in the NFL for a little bit longer than he probably should have, because he was a great teammate. He was a great mentor. He was an adult in the room for Mitch Trubisky for a while in Chicago, right? You need those type of guys on your roster in the NFL. Mason can be that guy. So just go be that guy. Leave all the other ancillary stuff. Just let it die. Just leave it be.
I agree. That seems like that would be the healthy approach for Mason Rudolph. But and here's the thing, he's taking that as far as helping the young guys, and his shot at Ben at least is outside of the locker room for now, and not something that he'll have to worry about. So we'll see how much that continues. Again, mini camp starts Monday, so we're looking at a situation where we'll be able to see these guys take more steps and how the Steelers might use them moving forward. Maybe we see more reps at different positions. Maybe we see the quarterback battle change a little bit. That could be part of what happened there. But it'll also be the last shot we get to see these guys before training camp. So it's going to be exciting. We'll be there covering it for you here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, as well as Wes with Steel Nation Radio, and myself with SteelersNow.com. Wes, thanks for joining the show. We ran way over today, but these were such fun topics we had to with my man. Wes, let people know you can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, we'll be broadcasting live, continuing at minicamp Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 10 a.m. on Steelers Nation Radio is when Arthur Moats and I go live. If you want to catch us on iHeart, Steelers.com, your mobile apps as well, too. Or you can always just subscribe to the Steelers Blitz wherever you get your podcast. We have Chris on once a week. We have Brian Bacco on once a week. We had Jenna Harner on this week.
Yeah.
So it's all the same cast of characters that you hear from here. We have a lot of fun. We're doing 3-hour live shows every day at OTAs and minicamp, so make sure you're checking us out live if you want to on the podcast. And then, as always, for my fellow tortured WVU souls, Ears and Beers podcast that I host with our buddy Adam Crowley, where we're talking WVU sports as well.
Absolutely check them out. They do great work. Check Wes out everywhere he does. He does great work. For those who are probably asking, where's Jenna Harner? She's on vacation, and we ain't messing up her vacation. She'll be back next week.
I am going to disappoint some people, all right?
Yeah,
Slide
chill
Mr.
out.
Jabroni in here for the lovely Jenna Harner. I mean,
don't think I don't see you guys simping in the comment section on YouTube. I see you guys, and you know what you're doing. So you guys got to cut it out. We like having Jen on the show because she talks great football. But anyways, Wes, thanks so much for being on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Thank you all, dear listeners and viewers, for checking us out here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm Chris Carter. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at SteelersNow.com. You can also check out this show on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Odyssey, or YouTube. If you're checking us out on YouTube, hit the like button on the video, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel to get all of our daily episodes and our bonus episodes and our breaking news updates. We're going to be done for the weekend, but we'll be back Monday. I'm going to try to put together a bonus episode for y'all. Not sure if I'll get the time. I got to trip us myself. I got to put together. But if we do, we'll check it out. So stay tuned with the YouTube channel and all our other channels as well. But thanks again. We'll be seeing you next week right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.